The United States government has decided to expel 15 diplomats from the Cuban embassy in Washington. Remember, all of this on the heels of the United States choosing to bring back 21 of its diplomats from Havana over the weekend. That, of course, taking place on account of an unexplained sort of sonar attack that diplomats in America were in Havana, were complaining of. The United States, of course, choosing to bring back and shut down at least 60% of its working staff in Havana on account of those complaints. Now, of course, the latest on that story, the United States government has decided to expel 15 diplomats from the Cuban embassy in Washington. My colleague Aditya Dhunna joining us live on the broadcast for more on that story. Aditya, it may be too soon to say, but is this one of the proverbial last straws in the coffin, if it were, of that burgeoning relationship between the United States and Cuba that took so many years to come about under the Obama administration?
Yeah, that's right, Aisha. I have in my hand a statement from the Secretary of State of the United States, Rex Tillerson. He says the decision was made due to Cuba's failure to take appropriate steps to protect our diplomats in accordance with its obligations under the Vienna Convention. Now, obviously, this comes after the United States decided to pull back 60% of its diplomatic staff from Havana after a few of the diplomats faced that sonic attack, which led to some complaint of memory loss, some complaint of unexplained headaches. So this is a definite retaliation and, in fact, a new low in the relationship between Cuba and United States.
Right. Aditya, though, going back to the developments of Saturday, now the statement that was released then said that the United States continues to have a diplomatic relationship with Cuba, and the pulling back of 60% of the staff there was only on account of what was happening in terms of those sonic attacks. But there was also a commitment, so to speak, that Mr. Tillerson mentioned, and that was to maintain a relationship with Cuba. But a lot seems to have changed within a period of just 3 days.
Well, Aisha, in a way, if you look at it now, the mistrust between United States and Cuba's relationship is somewhat back. We do remember in earlier administrations, if you go back in time and look at the history, United States presidents did try to somehow cause any damage to the Castro regime, and in fact, when President Obama had gone during his last days of his administration to Havana to restore diplomatic ties after more than 50 years, this was seen as a positive step. But during his campaign, President Trump was very critical of the deal that Obama had struck with the Cubans. He had said that this is something which is not in interest of America. He has in fact went ahead and pulled back partial portions of that deal. The deal stays, but what will be the future of this deal and what will be the future of these ties, it remains to be seen really now.
Absolutely. Big question marks on the relationship. And as you pointed out clearly that it's been one that's been marked by mistrust for decades. However, there was that change that came about towards the end of President Obama's term in office. But slowly and steadily, Aditya, in many ways, we're seeing that legacy being chipped away at by President Trump. Do you think that this is also going to cause a certain amount of, let's say, questions being asked about President Trump's policy towards Cuba? I asked this based on, some of the statements he made at the UNGA about the other countries in Latin America, Venezuela specifically.
Well, if we look at President Trump's foreign policy, questions are being raised. Obviously, with his approach towards foreign policy at the moment, there are questions being raised over Rex Tillerson and his handling of affairs as far as not just Cuba, but affairs around the world, North Korea specifically, are concerned. As far as this particular case is concerned, Aisha, we do know that investigators haven't been able to explain what really happened. There are a lot of theories which are going about around. Some are saying this could be attacked by Russians. Some are even saying that this was an attempt at surveillance by the Cuban government, which just simply went wrong at the moment. There are no reasons really behind these sonic attacks. But as far as the larger foreign policy of the Trump administration is concerned, certainly questions are being raised. And definitely, in fact, if we just go back in time, we saw Trump in kind of a public spat with his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, over his approach to North Korea, saying that these guys won't listen. I mean, and we'll handle it, Rex, if you remember those tweets. So certainly, this will obviously raise more questions. What will be the fate of the relationship moving forward? It remains to be seen.
Absolutely. Thanks for reminding us, Aditya. I'd almost forgotten about that rather public spat between President Trump and the Secretary of State. Thanks so much, Aditya Dhunna, for bringing us up to speed on those developments.